evening, everybody. I want to thank Zach for inviting me, you for being here, and that wonderful introduction. I feel like I just need to get in the car and go home now. Wow. I got 32 years, clean and sober. And there was a time I couldn't go 32 minutes without getting high, without getting drunk. I can have a drink if it's a 55-gallon drum. Anything less, is not enough. My story started before I even was born. My father was a very dark-skinned Puerto Rican. Had this long name. Pedro Jesus Jose Pacheco Garcia de Colon. That's a mouthful. Peter Jesus, yeah. And he met this younger Polish woman. She's about as white as that paper. He was a little too dark for their taste, I guess, and in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the family said, if you go through with this, you're dead to us. So love's gonna save the day. They got on the Greyhound bus and went as far as the money would take them. Got off in New Orleans. So I'm not Cajun, I'm a Puerto Rican. That's just where they got off the bus. Grew up with no extended family, which I later look at as an influence that kind of shaped who I became. Our first speaker talked about this. See, I'm not a believer in the fact that we're victims. We're not. But I do believe that there are things that happen to us that kind of shape and influence the decisions we make and the people we become. And growing up in New Orleans in the St. Thomas housing projects, the worst part of the city, we were broke as a joke. And it seemed like everybody was getting it in. My father was an alcoholic, he was a gambler. The night that he died, he was dressed in a suit, gave us all a kiss. He was going to his poker game, dressed to the nines, as they said. And I remember being hungry. And if you're wondering about the suit, I'm just following directions because I'm kind of standing out. Nobody's got one on but me. My sponsor told me early on, he said, Hector, if anybody ever asks you to speak, not that they would, but if they ever do, you put on a suit and a tie. And I'm thinking, that's not in the big book. What are you talking about? He said, you represent the fellowship. There may be some newcomer who came to the first meeting, and none of us wanted to be here. I've yet to meet anybody who woke up and had an epiphany and heard the voice of God and said, I need to go to AA. Something's driving a bus to get us there. But once you get there, and we're hurting, they're listening to you, you look halfway decent, and you're putting together a couple of sentences that kind of make some sense, and they might want what you have. So if you're asked to speak, put a suit on. So I just followed directions. He's no longer with us, but every year on my anniversary, I get my coin and I put it on his grave, and I thank him. He was like my emotional father. I didn't want any of this mess. I was angry about life. My father died, like I said, when I was 8. My mother remarried this big galoot of a guy, and we moved to the Gulf Coast in Mississippi, and I was lost. I didn't know anything about goats and cows, and I'm a city kid, so I was lost, didn't fit in. He was abusive, would beat my mother up, and the little guy's got to jump in there and help out. That only works out in the movies, And he turned out to be a pedophile, which, that wasn't fun either. I was a little too old at 13, but my younger siblings got that. Right after my father died, there was this wonderful guy in the neighborhood who used to do things for kids. Everybody loved him because he'd take us to go see the Saints play, and when the Jazz were still in New Orleans, the basketball team. But he was doing some other stuff with us. So who could I tell? Dad's dead. Mom, who had been held down because my father was very controlling. He was the boss with the hot sauce, king of the castle. She pushed out the puppies, had his food done. He ate first before everybody else. Strict disciplinarian. Can't tell him. And my mother developed her own alcoholism because she finally had some freedom. And I became what they call the parentified child. I had to take care of the younger kids and then put mom to bed after she got drunk. So I was real angry. Right after my father died, I had my first drink. My older brother, 7 years older, had a birthday party because we were never allowed to have those kind of things with my dad. And I got extremely drunk, and I threw up all over the place. Nobody put me to bed because I think everybody else was drunk too. And I woke up the next morning, and this might have been a sign, but as my friend John says, I wasn't Dr. Phil at the time, analyzing all this stuff. And I remember exactly what I said when I woke up. I said, man, this feels terrible. Most people, normal folks, when they drink too much and get sick, have a hangover. Then they find Jesus all of a sudden. Oh, God, I'm never going to do this again. That's not what I said. I said, this feels terrible. But if I keep practicing, I'll get better at it. Because I found a higher power at 8 years old. It was something greater than myself, and it gave me that sense, that feeling that a lot of the speakers talked about. Because addiction, in my opinion, is about the hole in the soul. And if my life isn't what I'd like it to be, to whatever degree, what can I do to change how I feel? And addiction works instantly. You don't have to do a lot of work. Give me a drink. Give me a drug. Let me go to the casino. Let me buy 50 more things off of Amazon. Let me have sex with anybody that's got a pulse, that's breathing, that smiles at me. If you got a husband, that's a technicality. We can work around that. But you can change how you feel. But it's a temporary solution that only compounds the problem. Nothing is solved. It's a God-shaped hole. Addiction is a spiritual search, but it's like a shortcut, and it's not really the real thing. So I went through life angry. I could have went to any college I wanted to go to. The school counselors were working with me. Mississippi, the school system was like 50th in the country at the time, probably still around the same. And I quit in the 12th grade because I was so angry. I'll show them. Who did I show? I just hurt myself. The heat was on. I was getting in trouble. And I could see the handcuffs coming. Didn't look good, so I joined the Air Force just to get away. That turned out to be a 4-year blackout. Drank a lot of Italian wine over in Italy. Was doing heroin, selling heroin and hashish. Got in trouble with this terrorist organization over there called the Brigati Rosso. I don't know if you remember that, the Red Brigade. Drug deal gone bad. We had a misunderstanding, we'll say. And I went home on leave and just decided not to come back. So for 30 days, you're AWOL. After that, you become a deserter. Because I didn't have any money to go back to Italy. So I went to Keesler Air Force Base and told them, I need, can you give me an advance on my next paycheck? You get paid on the 15th and the end of the month. And they said, well, we don't do that anymore. And I said, well, how the heck am I supposed to get back to Italy? They said, that's your fault. And being under the influence, I kind of, well, the hell with you, I'm just not going back. Brilliant. Finally get caught. I got a speeding ticket here in Delaware, and they run you through the system. And I've got a saying, thank God for codependent women, mothers, and other people's wives. I'd have never made it this far. There's always a woman in the picture, and I had some, they were just there for my pleasure. I would tell them I loved them, and I would share. 1 for them, 7 for me, another 1 for them, 5 more for me. And I was keeping track, keeping score, and I always wanted a woman who did drink and maybe smoke some weed so that she couldn't tell me about it. I mean, you're doing it too. And she pleaded with because I got incarcerated, and they wanted to send me for 3.5 years to Leavenworth Federal Prison. But because she begged and pleaded and, I manipulated that whole thing, her and them, they just gave me an other than honorable discharge. Now, they had some good benefits back then. So I did 4 years for actually nothing. Things just got worse. And it got to the point where one night I was watching this commercial for insurance, like 3 o'clock in the morning. And there's the husband standing there looking all wonderful, and the wife lovingly looking up at him, and the kids, even the dogs looking at him. And they got the manicured lawn and the 2 cars in the driveway, and it was the picture of everything that I wasn't. And I got so disgusted. And being under the influence, I was asking myself this question: Hector, what about you? One thing is genuine, honest, and true. And I stayed up all night, and I couldn't come up with one thing. And I was so depressed that the best idea I could come up with was killing myself. So I took a box cutter, and I was trying to hit my wrists. But, being intoxicated, I kept hitting my arm up here. Passed out in a pool of blood, and then somebody found me and took me to the emergency room. And I remember coming to, and I got even more depressed. I said, man, I can't even do this right. So I know what it means to be there. That's why I'm so grateful for the life that I have today. I get up every day, and the first thing I say before I even get out of bed, dear God, thank you for the day that I'm about to have. I get out of bed, kiss my mother's picture, and I always say the same thing: may I honor your memory today by what I do. I didn't want to do recovery at all. I'd gotten a DUI, and that was my entry into this. And I had my case moved from Court of Common Pleas to Superior Court, which probably isn't too wise. And I borrowed a suit from Boscov's at the Dover Mall. Still had the tag on it, the little booster crew. Yeah. And I showed up at court, and the Judge Trader, he says, Mr. Garcia, is there anything you'd like to say to the court? And I'm thinking, man, this is my time to shine. I said, Your Honor, I want to thank you for affording me this opportunity. And I'm convinced that after you hear what I've got to say, you will want to grant a recess, retire to your chambers so that you can begin to draft new legislation to protect people like me. Because I don't have a drinking problem. Now I realize that 5 hours after I had this accident and the Dover police had to help get my head out of the windshield, and I fought with them for 5 hours before I would submit to a blood sample. I said 5 hours after that, my blood alcohol was 0.32. Now back in the day, in the 80s, you had to have a 0.1 for a DUI. 0.32, today it's lower, it's 0.08. So I was drunk enough for 4 people to get a DUI. And if the number goes much higher, you stop breathing and you die. My logic is, I'm trying to impress upon this man that the number it had to be higher. I said, you could have taken a blood sample morning, noon, or night for the past 25 years and you would have gotten a comparable reading. Am I helping myself or am I digging a deeper hole? And I ended with, Your Honor, all this proves is I don't have a drinking problem. it is not my fault that God has given me the gift to drink more than most people. This man stood up, and I'm not going to say exactly what he said, turned beet red, and he says, if you don't sit down in my courtroom, I'm going to stick you somewhere you don't want to go. Now, my distorted thinking, I'm thinking, well, he disrespected me. There's people here in the courtroom. He can't do that. And we have freedom of speech in court in America, right? When you go to court, shut up. That's probably your best course of action. So I proceeded to tell him what he could do. You can go yourself. Let's just say it didn't end well. Clickety-click, off we go. But he took mercy on me, and he said, instead of keeping you incarcerated, I'm going to make you go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I didn't know anything about meetings. It was some kind of cult. As one of the speakers says, weak people. I showed up at my first meeting drunk and high because I couldn't get through life at all without being that way. And I'm listening to people talk, and they're going around the room. My name's John, and I'm an alcoholic. My name's Sandy, I'm an alcoholic. And I noticed something. It seemed like everybody had to say something. I said, oh, no. So when they got to me, I played it off. I even made up a name. I said, my name's Giovanni, and I'm a spectator. And that's exactly what they did. Now, you know we're sensitive. And I'm tuned in, and y'all are making fun of me. And then somebody had to mention this God thing, that higher power mess. I blew a gasket, stood up. I said, don't y'all know God hates me? I said, I'll meet y'all in the parking lot. There's like 50 people in a meeting. I'm not big enough to hurt myself. And I'm challenging them to a fist fight in the parking lot. That was my first AA meeting. And then I got real creative because there was only at the time one daytime AA meeting to go to, which meant I would have had to come down to like Dry Dock or up to Wilmington, and I didn't have the transportation to do it. So I got creative. I got a meeting list, and I was filling out my sheets. You just put the name of the meeting, the location, the time, and I would just fill in people's names. It's an anonymous program. I even signed one of them, Bill W. How are they supposed to know? But a funny thing happened. These old guys in AA started working with me. And as they say, they kind of loved me till I started to love myself. Because I was full of this self-loathing. I hated who I was. One of the benefits of my recovery today is the ability to sit still and be okay with the man in the mirror. I'm always telling the clients that I work with, learn to fall in love with ordinary. Life is punctuated by extraordinary moments, like watching your child be born, things like that. But for the most part, it's ordinary, and therein lies the beauty. It was my daughter's 40th birthday today, and she wanted to take me to breakfast, thanking me for the gift of life that I gave her. I've started a different legacy, because in my addiction, I was a foul person. I even told people my mother died when I had this little piece of a part-time job, because I could have won the Academy Award for Best Actor in a Dramatic Series for that day. Went into work, and I'm looking all pitiful, and somebody took the bait. I'm fishing. Hector, what's wrong? I said, oh, I just found out my mom died. Then I faked a tear. And they said, you need to go home, but I got to step up my game. I said, I knew you guys were short-staffed, and I didn't want to leave you hanging. Like I'm really a concerned coworker. So they came back 10 minutes later, had flowers, because it was in a mall. I had this little job at Sears, stealing merchandise out of the store, to supplement my income. So they gave me flowers and $60. And I did an about face and left. And I thanked him profusely. And when I got outside the building, I developed a resentment. I said, those cheap fill in the blank. They only gave me $60. My coworker, whose mom really did die, they gave her $90. Now, does that mean I'm a psychopath, sociopath? Well, it just means as you get desperate, you'll do things you swore you'd never do. Somebody mentioned Kensington in Philly. Remember that word Aramingo? Yeah. Had my kid in a car seat up there. But I'm thinking, well, they're in a car seat. They're safe. Yeah. Nuts. But I started to come around. And we're hyper vigilant. We're watching everything. And I noticed that everybody had this thing called sponsor. So I don't want to be the odd man out, so I'm going to get me a sponsor. So I picked this old guy who had a lot of health problems, older white guy, Andy. My thinking was, I will scare the heck out of him, and he'll pay me money not to hurt him. But he didn't take no mess off of me. He was very quiet, wasn't mean, but he told the truth. And when I'd come up with some brilliant ideas, like, what exactly does it mean to be willing? I'm doing all this theoretical stuff. He said, Hector, keep drinking. When you get desperate enough, you'll become willing to do whatever we tell you to do. That man saved my life. That's my sponsor that I put my medallion on his grave every year. Because of this program, it led me back to my relationship with Jesus Christ. It's not that I never believed in God. It's just my belief got distorted. Because I was thinking, God, if you love me so much, why'd you take my daddy? Why'd you let me be molested? Why'd I have to grow up with an alcoholic mother? All this kind of stuff. And these older guys in AA would say, well, did God really take your daddy? He was a 2.5 pack a day smoker. He had heart issues, and he was alcoholic. I think my dad had a lot to do with it. The guy who molested me, while that's not okay, God gives us this thing called free will. And he abused his power as an adult over a child. And he will have to answer for that. But it scarred me tremendously. And we get full of this, what I call internalized shame. I'm defective, deficient, less than, not good enough, a piece of... And none of that's true. God didn't make no junk. But because of the rooms, it helped me reevaluate my beliefs, because recovery really is about putting everything out on the table that you've ever come to believe and sifting through it with some help to see what works. And I found that I was an adult subscribing to the belief system of a little kid. This stuff wasn't working anymore. Accountability is important. It's necessary. The pronouns in the 12 steps are plural. They're not singular. It's not I or me. It's us and we. The Christian walk, you can have people coming up to altar call and accepting Christ. That's the event. But the process of Christian maturation, that's the most important part. What do we do then? Who's going to help you along that path? So I'm very grateful for the life that I have today. The wife that I have today didn't know anything about who I used to be. We've been together for a little over 30 years. And I'm just very grateful. I mean, somebody let me buy a house. I got a job. I got people talking nice stuff about me. How did this happen? It wasn't me. This is God. We're not pieces of trash. And if you look at the examples in the Bible of who God has used, yeah. Jesus wasn't hanging out with CEOs of Fortune 500 corporations. Thieves, prostitutes, illiterate fishermen, people like me. Our people. He would fit right in. And he would love us all as he does. I say a prayer every day, a lot of times throughout the day. It's a real simple, short, they call it the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And I just say that over and over and over. And it kind of resonates within my being. I want to end this with something from the big book. And it's applicable to this environment of the church. On page 164, the last paragraph, because that's the textbook part of it. They've never changed any of that. The words that they use in the big book are recovered. I am a recovered alcoholic. People have some questions. They say, you're not cured. They even talk about that too when they talk about step 10. We're not cured. What we have is a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance, more work, of our spiritual condition through these twin disciplines of prayer and meditation. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you. Until then, thank you.